Good morning, and thank you for joining today's webinar, CEETalks, Driving Forward Czechia and Slovakia's Transportation Gambit, hosted by Klinia Task Force. I'm Tamara Lagurashvili, Director of Central and Eastern Europe at CATF. And for those of you who might be hearing about CATF for the first time now, Klinia Task Force is a global climate organization that works to scale up pragmatic climate solutions. We work in the US, in Europe, Middle East, and Africa at the intersection of policy, business, and technology change. Today's webinar is the part of our flagship project called CEETalks, which really looks at the holistic picture of Central and Eastern Europe's energy transition. We have already hosted 5 webinars, the last one looking at Romania's energy transition, energy prices, especially in the light of Clean Industrial Deal, Action Plan for Affordable Energy, as well as the price cap that the Romanian government has introduced in order to shield its consumers and households for skyrocketing prices. Today we are shifting the gear, and I think that our conversation could not come in even at a more timely circumstances in the geopolitical fragmentation that we are navigating. We'll be looking at 2 key countries in Central and Eastern Europe that really are the manufacturing hubs of the automotive industry in Central and Eastern Europe. Slovakia is the world's first car producer per capita, and also Czechia is very close to that. Both countries have very well integrated supply chains, skilled workforces, and one of the highest foreign direct investment going in the automotive industry as well. Obviously, with a lot of considerations about how to navigate the climate targets set by the EU, making sure that there is no deindustrialization happening in Slovakia and Czechia, but also understanding how the countries can navigate this geopolitical complexity that we are navigating are going to be 2 key issues that we'll be tackling with our experts today. As you have seen some time ago, Trump's administration has imposed quite substantial tariffs worldwide and with special focus on the transportation sector. However, yesterday we also have heard about the 90-day pause on the tariffs, while the countries and the EU will try also to navigate and negotiate a better deal, which will obviously have a huge implication for the transportation sector and the competitiveness of the European Union, including Czechia and Slovakia. To talk about this and much more, where Czechia and Slovakia are as of now and how they can navigate this complex labyrinth of competitiveness and energy transition. Today we have a stellar panel that will be introduced by Michal Hrubý, who is the absolute prominent thought leader about the topic in the region, and he is also a senior fellow, research fellow at Skoda Auto University, and he will be moderating today's discussion. Michal, to you, and I wish all of you a very fruitful discussion about Czechia and Slovakia's transportation future. Thank you very much.
Tamara, thank you very much for this introduction. And once again, also from my side, hello everyone, to all of you actually, either watching now online live or those who will watch this recorded. So I'm very happy to have really esteemed guests here today with me. I will very briefly introduce everyone, but I'm sure that you will get to know them much better through the discussion that we will hold. I will start alphabetically. So actually, first, my friend and researcher, Monika Martišková, working for Central European Labor Studies Institute and Charles University. I'm very happy to have Monika here. So hello.
Hello.
Then we will have Zdeněk Pecel, Executive Director of Czech Automotive Industry Association, much better known here in the local environment as Autosap. So thank you very much, Mr. Pecel, for joining us.
Hello, everybody.
Then we have Maja Pozvek. We have an EU Affairs Manager from the Clean Air Task Force. So I'm very happy to have you here, Maja. Hello.
Good morning, everyone.
And hopefully also in a minute, we'll be joined by Jan Michal, Director General from Czech Invest, hopefully on the way, but keeping very busy schedule. So let's see. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. I guess we will have an interesting discussion. I also wanted to have a note on the tariffs, but as it's changing day to day, it's almost hour on hour. It's very hard to comment on this as we are live at this time. I will just follow up quickly on what Tamara already mentioned. So we're here with Czechia and Slovakia, very strongly integrated into the automotive supply chains. Tamara already stressed the importance. I will just highlight again that not only that we are very well integrated, very large car producers, it's also seen in the numbers, because if we only look at the sort of GDP, which is derived from the automotive industry, in the very narrow sense, it's usually around 4 or 5% of GDP, and it can go even higher if we look at the supply chains across and also beyond automotive itself. We export most of our production, so there's usually more than 90% of all the cars produced exported from Czechia and Slovakia on the EU markets or abroad, even further beyond the EU borders. On the other hand, Czechia and Slovakia is also relatively under a large share of foreign control. So there is a very strong base of local, small and medium enterprises, but there is also a vast majority of big companies with foreign control. And just to maybe quickly also have a remark on the scale of the industry in time, it's very nice to mention that just, let's say, in the last 15 years from the global financial crisis since 2008, both industries in Czechia and in Slovakia more than doubled in size when it comes to the real production volume. So we actually look at very dynamic industries, and this is just really looking at the automotive in the very narrow sense. But as we will surely hear from our panelists today, it can get much broader attention also when we look at the wider supply chains. And I think that with no further ado, we can jump to our discussion. We will actually start with the question on exactly the current state of automotive industry. And I think that no one is in a better position to comment on this than Mr. Zdeněk Pecl from AutoSAP, who will surely be able to capture much better what is really the state of the automotive and transport industry in Czechia. So my first question going to Mr. Pecl would be if he could open our discussion with sort of assessment, what is the current state of not only competitiveness of the auto industry itself, but also the state of clean transition. Because as Tamara mentioned, there is this sort of push towards cleaner transport. And so if you could open our discussion with commenting on the state in 2025 and where are we currently going? Thank you.
Michal, thank you. I think you basically mentioned two, let's say, different topics: the state of the automotive industry, the developments it's undergoing, and the state of clean transition, especially from the perspective of a consumer. Because if you look at the consumer market, especially in the automotive sector, then in the Czech Republic, the uptake of electric vehicles, one of sort of the best or most discussed solutions of cleaner mobility in Europe, is rather low. It's around, let's say, single-digit percent. On the other hand, if you look at the production side, basically every major OEM manufacturer, be it Skoda, Hyundai, or Toyota, and I'm speaking about the passenger cars because we also have buses and trucks which are electrifying, has models in their production portfolio that are fully electric or partially electrified. So if you look at those numbers, the production side numbers, then you can see that the Czech production and manufacturing side really corresponds to, let's say, the average situation across Europe, because there are countries that are more developed, especially in the north when it comes to electromobility. Some are less in the south and east. So Czech industry tries to be the caterer of the mass market demand and based on that, the production portfolio is sort of set up. So in that sense, the Czech industry does what it should be doing for sure when it comes to produce the car. Of course, the clean transition is not only about the car, about the production itself, and I think in automotive it's much visible than in many other areas of businesses. Many of the companies have already announced their plans to be CO2 neutral by 25, 30 when it comes to production side. Some of them already have CO2 neutral facilities in Czech Republic as well. So this is happening. What I think we need to work on more is the customer acceptance, because when you look specifically at the electromobility, I think it needs to be said that there are conditions that are working against it, and that's one of the conditions I would be also mentioning if we were discussing the production side. It is the price of the electricity, because in quite a lot of situations, if you are not in a position that you have your own private house with your own facility of electricity production, meaning the solar production, then you basically have to pay for electricity on the superchargers, which at the moment cost around, if I count it to euros, to be more understandable for the audience, it's somewhere 60-70 cents per kilowatt, which if you count it with the average consumption, quite often translates to a worse TCO than with a diesel vehicle. So this is something that obviously is not motivating the customers to switch. It only, let's say, makes the electromobility a perfect solution for certain part of the market, not for the full market, which is where the European regulation is currently heading for. And the situation is basically the same for the businesses. The electricity and regulation sort of makes it difficult for business to thrive, to grow, to be globally competitive. So what we are lacking to continue as we are in Europe, to continue with our ambitions, we need obviously make money in order to be able to pay for those ambitions. And we need some kind of boost, some kind of kickstart. So we need to be discussing what kind of kickstart can we look at, whether it is some kind of regulatory simplification, or what other areas do we have as a competitive side in Europe to actually achieve our ambitious goals.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm very happy that you also mentioned the customer perspective, but also the sort of production perspective of how actually CO2 incentive the production process itself is. And I'm actually very sure that we will in this discussion have time to come back to this perspective of customers as households, and also customers as fleet, which is sold to businesses. So that will be also one of the very important aspects. So thank you very much for this first introductory question and your answer. Now we would like to sort of have the other perspective, also looking at Slovakia. So I'm very happy to continue with the question to Monika. And I would like basically to have this sort of comparison, whether you see any measure differences when we look at the state of automotive industry in Czechia and Slovakia, again, in terms of the state of competitiveness, clean transition. This is, again, more or less open question. We're looking forward to your answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for invitation in this highly relevant debate and quite needed debate. So when comparing Slovakia and Czechia, I start mostly with commonalities between these two countries, because both are, as you, Michal, already mentioned, dominated by foreign companies and integrated in the global production networks, mostly through the production bases and production sites. The high volumes of car produced in these two countries expose them a lot to international pressures and development, especially when we are discussing right now tariffs and eventual impact if they are really implemented on the labor market. Especially Slovakia seems to be highly exposed. Also, comparing slightly the activities or how the industry is developing between Slovakia and Czechia, from data we know that research and development investments are higher in Czechia compared to Slovakia. But again, when we compare both countries to Germany or Western European countries, it's still like lower amounts. And this also mirrors in the composition of the workforce, because Slovakia would have like the highest share of middle qualified workers in the field, and at the same time, comparatively lower share of high qualified workers. The shares are slightly growing within years, also because of the digitalization and automatization of the production, and in general changes also in the product portfolios connected also to electromobility. So all these elements are important when we asking what is the current position and what is the future position of the industry. And also this is trying to see the starting position when we're looking into the future. And I think it's not that conclusive, or it cannot be said that one country is heading very well and another not that much. Of course, because of many of the decisions of the capital residing here is not anyhow influenced by the local markets. It's either European Union or the businesses themselves. So what is important to emphasize at the same time is that these countries attracted and managed to attract these huge volumes of foreign direct investment into the country in the last 20 years. And this FDI policy growth was one of the only policies we did in terms of national level incentives. And this model seems to be exhausted now. Maybe in terms of attracting new investments, Slovakia maybe looks a bit better because of attracting investments in EV production, like Gotion or Volvo, which plan to produce only electric cars in Slovakia. But I would not, it might be advantage of saying, okay, we have still quite enough production capacities, but it's at the same time exposure to the international markets. And what we observe also in my research and interviews with the representatives of businesses, that it's the highly volatile market right now. In last 2 years, no one can really rely on any volumes contracted, because this is changing quite quickly. And also we started to discussing it, and it's important to mention, because this is valid for both countries, Slovakia and Czechia, that the EV's uptake, so the consumption side, is completely disconnected from the production, and the EV uptake is one of the lowest. It was the infrastructure problem, then there is a price problem, but what we observe is also the attitudes problem. Yeah, so something which transfers into the political debate against the Green Deal, against the adoption of EV cars. A lot of even business representatives consider EVs as, quite often they say, dead end in terms of industrial production or the future of the automotive industry. So all these needs to be discussed, clarified, and understood better, because right now the policy is still mostly driven from the above, from the European Union, and the acceptance, not to talk about uptake, but even acceptance about the changes still very low in these countries, which is political problem mostly. So that would be maybe my input and introduction for now.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm also happy to hear that you mentioned, as well as Zdeněk Pecel did, this sort of disconnection between what is the consumption perspective in Czechia and how it's actually connected to the activities of producers who focus on the foreign markets. So we will definitely come back to it, as well as to the issue of workforce and upskilling and reskilling. So thank you with that. You also mentioned investments, and then a very nice bridge to then continue our discussion with Jan Michal from Czech Invest. Before I open the floor to Jan Michal with my question, I will just also remind you that if you want to ask any questions to our participants, just don't hesitate to put your questions in the Q&A session. I will be very happy to use those questions as we go through the discussion, so we can just simply take whatever question comes and it's relevant to our discussion. So now let's go to Jan Michal, and the question will be again more of an introductory to investments in general. So very happy to hear your thought about what is the current state and also capacity when we look at Czech Republic. What is the capacity to really implement many of these innovation and investment strategies, which are now aimed at the automotive industry in the wider sense, to promote clean and digital transition, to really get the sort of transformation of automotive industry going. So floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me all very well. I'm connected from Olomouc, so sorry for the initial, let's say, trouble in terms of being maybe a little bit 2-3 minutes late in terms of connecting fully. But I was following with interest the earlier presentations, and I'm here because actually I just visited a company in the Czech Republic, which is operating in the automotive industry, producing especially, in precise machinery bearings for car manufacturers, but also for other manufacturers. And I think it was quite a, let's say, inspiring morning discussion, because on one hand, I'm still seeing, that the figures in terms of the development of the automotive industry over the last decade sort of produce, I think, some positive picture in terms of the overall growth of sales and overall growth of employment. But on the other hand, we can see more and more that many companies in the automotive value chain experiencing a lot of difficulties. The company that I visited is JTEC, and obviously they are also a member of Autosap. So I'm sure Zdeněk Pecl knows them very well, and we just discussed where the latest developments in their segment of the production, because it's one of the companies that, in terms of its value chain, has relied a lot on domestic suppliers, but because of the competitive pressures, they are also looking more and more outside, including to China. And I think that is something that I think it's worth of reflecting in terms of where we go and how the European companies and also the domestic suppliers can remain overall competitive. So basically, this is exactly what we discuss, how we can also apart from taking some feedback, also how we can help the companies that are under pressure, either to adapt their production portfolio or by other means in terms of, for example, finding new clients. So in terms of the broader context, in terms of the bigger picture, I think what is positive, the Czech Republic's new economic strategy adopted last October puts automotive and clean mobility really at the forefront. Yes, so I think that's one important message. Second is that the related, let's say, some other sectors that are, I think, also very much prioritized by the state, which I'm part of, and Czech Invest is part of, are also very relevant for the automotive sector. So that is support for the development of our semiconductor industry in the Czech Republic, support also for the development of digital infrastructure and technologies, and an important issue, obviously, energy, both in terms of access to energy, but also in terms of energy that is also sustainable and affordable. Yes, and I think especially on the last account, I mean, the message that I got this morning again, I think part of the problem in the Czech Republic and I think in Central Europe is that high energy prices, not only with regard to our global competitors, but also on the European continent. Obviously, we can see that the price differential between let's say Central Europe or the core European continent and what we can see in the Iberian Peninsula or Scandinavia, I think that is something where I think we are really facing, let's say, or losing a bit of the competitive edge, and we have to see other means how we can remain competitive and support our companies. So in terms of what the government is doing, I mean, obviously, one of the tools that we have at our disposal is our Investment Incentives Act. Obviously, this is not something that I think should, in my view, in the longer term, be sustainable in terms of putting more and more public money into it. I think there are other means, but I think we are also exposed to international competition in this area. So I think it is also one of, let's say, the transitional instruments that I think we are using and which is available there for both large and small and medium-sized companies. For the bigger companies, the government has recently launched a new strategic investment support program in the Czech Republic under the EU transitional and crisis framework, which aims at fostering innovation and production in areas such as batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, heat pumps, and electrolyzers. So I mean, you have heard some products which are relevant for the automotive industries, and this program is open for companies that can come up with projects in the value of at least 110 million euros. So these are really big projects that can bring let's say strategic difference to what is happening in the Czech automotive, and is open until the end of September of this year. Obviously, there are a lot of other efforts in terms of promotion of and support of electromobility under different operational programs funded by the European Union. I think some of these programs are more useful for the small and medium-sized companies. But when it takes to other challenges, I think the Czech Republic and the public administration in this regard, I think, is also facing multiple issues, including attracting and retaining talent at expert level, management, IT positions, etc. So I think this is one of the issues, but I think the programs are in place. We at Czech Invest alone, I think, have over the past period, I think, really processed many requests from companies from the automotive sector. Actually, the automotive sector also in terms of our client base has been the biggest in terms of projects processed and supported by Czech Invest, amounting to nearly 1/4 of all projects that we process and support at Czech Invest, followed by also, let's say, industries which are related, such as electronics, machinery, metals processing, plastics, and others. We are also maintaining quite substantial suppliers database with which we can help our companies to find partners. I think one of the challenges recognized also by the OECD is that there is a potential for, let's say, more small and medium-sized companies being better integrated in the big value chains of large multinational enterprises. So I think our supplier support program, I think it's something that can help to address this challenge. We are also working with a number of institutions that are supporting the development of the ecosystems relevant for the automotive industry, be it, and I think there are two main topics that I would like to mention. One is the development of the Czech battery ecosystem so that we can build and help to support the transition of the automotive sector towards clean technologies and production of EVs. And the second important one is also development and support for the semiconductor industry. I think with the upcoming investment by the US chip manufacturer onsemi in the Zlín region, I think that is something which also, thanks to their partnership with Volkswagen and Škoda Auto, I think is progressing in the right direction. But we are working also with other companies in the semiconductor industry, and I think it is great that the Czech companies such as Škoda SIP and others are able to also develop chip designs, and I think Brno becoming an important chip design center. So I think one other important point. As for startups, in Czech Invest we are also supporting startups. So managing a few, let's say several startup incubators, some nationally funded. The biggest one, technological incubation, where we have established a mobility innovation hub. I have to say that, and I think Zdeněk would agree, that we have expected more in terms of the response on the part of the startups in this mobility cluster to apply for support, and it's not only financial support, but it's support in terms of mentoring and developing production and their marketing strategies that we have hoped that it will be bigger. So I think that is something that I think we have to have another look how we can let's say revive and support mobilize interest in this area a little bit more, and I think it's also important that we improve our legislative framework so that we better support companies that are part of the ecosystem, be it through the regulation or that we provide, let's say, better support to new technologies, including at different levels of the value chain, because certainly also the advanced technologies, sometimes they start with, let's say, also what one would call maybe, let's say, the dirty part of the value chain. But I think we also need, if we do not want to be fully reliant on China and other external suppliers, I think we also need to see what we can do in terms of improving access to critical raw materials, and let's say the initial stages of the production chain, what can be produced in Europe, including in the Czech Republic. And I think that is something I think it's good that the government, the universities, the research institutions, and the whole ecosystem is looking at. So that would be my intro.
Yes, thank you very much, and I'm pretty sure that actually all these sort of hurdles we will get to in the follow-up discussion. I would like to pick 2 points which you mentioned, and to which we can actually very easily follow now with Maja Pozvák, because you mentioned that there are some sort of transition instruments which are, let's say, readily available for Czechia to utilize in this clean transition. Also, the new economic strategy of the Ministry of Industry and Trade for the Czech Republic. And these sort of instruments and strategies mostly are aligned or should be aligned with the overall EU strategies, EU policies. And so maybe this is the easiest way how to now sort of get this Brussels perspective also from Maja Pozvák. So if I could have a question to you, mostly really connected to Brussels, and so what is your take now on the Brussels debate? Because we see that there is really this sort of trade-off from some perspective, maybe trade-off, maybe not really, on the issue of competitiveness and clean transition, because we need to sort of maintain our competitiveness, maybe sometimes be more progressive or less in the clean transition. So what is now the debate in this very sort of difficult situation that we're facing? What is your take on the Brussels debate, and maybe also how Czechia and Slovakia are sort of active in this discussion in Brussels?
Yes, thank you very much, Michal. Indeed, I'm here today with my Brussels hat, so that's sort of the perspective that I can contribute as sort of, you know, a general umbrella under which Czechia and Slovakia's transitions will also take place. The policy debate around the sort of automotive industry in Brussels is very lively, to say the least. In fact, I think it's become almost a bit of a, you know, symbolic policy area where this adjustment of approach from the European Green Deal in the previous term to Clean Industrial Deal now has sort of played out in a very, very obvious way. We know before we had the European Green Deal where sort of the main objective was decarbonizing, so climate neutrality by 2050. Even though I would argue that it was always intended to have a positive economic impact as well, right? Even though that wasn't always explicitly said. There are a number of policies within that umbrella that were sort of aimed to incentivize cleaner, innovative, new technologies, and so, you know, as such would have a positive economic impact. But then now with Clean Industrial Deal, that has really been made explicit, competitiveness, right, as a key objective. But then decarbonization still remains a key part of that plan. In fact, Clean Industrial Deal is called a joint roadmap for competitiveness in decarbonization. And as the European Commission would say, it's really decarbonization that is our growth strategy. It's through that we will achieve sort of competitiveness, right? Because the innovation that decarbonization requires, of course, can be a driver of productivity, of growth, can generate high quality jobs and have a number of other positive effects for the society as a whole. So, you know, it's really an economic opportunity if we know how to take it. And so I think what's sometimes a bit hard to understand or confusing in the policy debate is a bit of these mixed messages that I would say sort of incumbent auto industry sending in terms of, you know, on one hand wanting to really compete with the best, be the best in global terms, and then on the other hand asking for sort of concessions to go slower. And I think these two things are probably hard to reconcile one with the other, you know, in the context where China is going full steam ahead. They're already, you know, selling electric vehicles at mass market prices. They've reached 40%, I think, of penetration of electric vehicles. So I think sort of the rest of the world is not waiting for us. So we either, you know, have to step up or we won't be competitive. Whereas if you look at sort of the EU, we know now that the car makers have requested an exemption for 2025 CO2 reduction requirement, which was sort of granted by the European Commission, still has to be approved by the Council and the Parliament. And, you know, while it's framed as sort of a flexibility measure, just, you know, the overall transition would not be affected. There are also, there's analysis out there saying the opposite, right? That this would sort of slow down the transition overall, starting with fewer electric vehicles on the roads this year. So that's sort of the context. And I think what we're also worried about that this is not a one-off trend, you know, one exemption, fine, but rather a beginning of a trend that we can see sort of frankly beyond the automotive sector as well, where the competitiveness angle is sort of used more as an excuse to sort of water down the most measures that have been agreed in the past term, you know, with extensive consensus building process. So that's sort of what we're worried about, I would say. In this context, I think, you know, I'm sorry to say that it is the Czech and the Slovak governments that are more on the side of countries that are sort of advocating for slower transition, weaker measures. This is not always fully transparent, right? A lot of these council conversations happen behind closed doors. But we know that, you know, for instance, Czechia has been very vocal in getting this 2025 exemption. And has in fact wanted even more flexibility, let's say. Both countries have been on the kind of wanted sort of lower standards when it comes to trucks, for instance. There was another file last year, similar to Euro 7 standards and so on. So I think, I think it's certainly, partially understandable. Both these countries have a major stake in these industries, and transition is hard. It's a change. It's challenging, but I think, it's ultimately probably not a winning strategy in the context where that I described in terms of, China, and then the global EV market is still projected to grow. So again, to be competitive, I think we need to sort of be consistent with our message and sort of, assure that predictable, stable environment that we always say is so positive for investment. So I'll stop here just in the interest of time to give the local experts as well the chance to weigh in.
No, thank you very much for this overview, and I think you rightly mentioned. I mean, the environment is changing very fast when it comes to what we face, sort of in terms of competition, and also how legislation and all this sort of strategic compass is really changing very fast. Maybe now this takes me to a follow-up question to Zdeněk Pecel, because we know and we see that just during the, let's say, 5-6 years, the change in environmental regulation, but now also the sort of very heavy shift towards industrial policy has been very fast. But first, there was the sort of higher pressure on the environmental regulation, which is now only followed with some industrial strategies to really support the industry. So maybe this would be a question from the perspective of AutoSAP. How do you see this dynamics going? Because it's a very or relatively big shift within very few years. So how do you see this sort of playing out when we have such a dramatic change within just a few years?
I would say quite briefly that I actually don't see any of that happening in reality. In all the statements by the European Commission, they say they stick to their previous strategy of the last 5 years, and that's a full and fast decarbonization. The fact is, again, that these plans were drawn on the premises that in the end we might obtain some technologies that will allow us to achieve those goals, but those technologies are not available in the market, or at least not economically viable in the market. And so these strategies that Europe is making are not based on objective data, are definitely not based on the markets, and definitely not supported across Europe by Europe itself, by European policies, as along with the policies on the side of the national member states. So from that perspective, I don't think actually that this is working, and in the long term it will not work even more. So we should start a real discussion, not just make some concessions here and there.
And maybe if I could have a direct follow-up question to this. At the moment in the EU itself, and especially in the countries where automotive industry is also very strong in terms of contribution to local economies, is there any country which actually has a strategy in place how to maybe really navigate this environment where we can inspire, or it's actually really that we are sort of also in Czechia sort of front running in the terms of what to do next? Is there any inspiration from abroad?
It's really hard to let's say find a true inspiration, because we need to understand the limitations that come with our size and location. When it comes to Europe, you see that quite a lot of countries are amidst of political turmoil, amidst of financial and fiscal turmoil. So they will not able to upkeep any of the policies they or their previous governments were thinking of, because they will not have the money nor political agreement to continue. The only countries that have clear policies and are able to mandate them, put them in practice, are, as we see it, China and the US. But it's really hard to compare to those because those regimes are more autocratic than Europe is. So it's much easier to align the practices and move forward fast ahead. So what we basically need to continue with is an open trade policy in Europe. Use the fact that we have one of the strongest markets in the world. On the other hand, it's also a weakness when it comes to our produce. There were mention of exports outside Europe. India was mentioned, but let's be realistic. I mean, none of our cars will be exported to India. The market is not financially ready for that kind of imports. So
Yep.
we also really have to be realistic and made our decision based on data.
Yes. Yeah. No. Understood. I think it's yes, as you say, like it's very unique position that we're in as in Czechia and Slovakia. So thank you very much for this answer. Now I would move to also a question which we have in the Q&A. And maybe I would ask Monica to, if she would be so kind to maybe tell her opinion on this. I will also complement it with my question. So first would be, we haven't touched upon, but we should also touch upon more the workforce perspective. And then this is sort of your specialization. So I would be interested in how do you see the workforce perspective on the clean transition in auto industry, and actually how difficult, you know, this transition is in terms of skills and upskilling of employees. And then the question which I would maybe like you to comment is also going back to the customer perspective, which you mentioned is quite divided from the perspective of just production for broad markets, but what about the home market? And there is a question how actually important factor it is that we're sort of like and also from the power sort of purchasing power perspective, what cars we can maybe afford in Czechia and Slovakia, just when you look at the factor of how old fleet we have in Czechia and Slovakia. So maybe these two questions to you. I will be very strict. If you could just limit yourself in 2-3 minutes, that would be very nice, so we can follow up on other speakers. Thank you.
Sure. I say the debate is very interesting and we just started and it's about to finish. So very briefly on the perspective of workers, I think mostly debated is the requalification and upskilling of workers in the automotive industry. From our research, what we know is that most of the requalification and reskilling is individualized. It means that it strongly depends on individuals uptaking the courses. Employers on one hand offer to upskill or even like micro reskilling or micro courses to remain competitive for the workers. But when we look again at the composition, we see that those workers lower qualified or middle qualified by the lower end, who are mostly threatened by automatization, digitalization, and losing job, uptaking these courses the least. So there is disproportionate. There is disproportion. I think it's not because of the policy, but it's because of the lacking policy, and it's because of the. I think we miss here a coordination and more of the collective voice of workers in terms of setting up appropriate incentives to participate in the education. Either at the company level, there are a few interesting practices as showing those workers possibilities to attend the training or the education as a trial, because often they are even afraid of uptaking any upskilling courses. And then you have this element of finding time and paid time to educate in the adult education. This is like huge challenge from the perspective of workers in the automotive industry, and especially in Slovakia and Czechia with huge base of production workers still. So This is short comment on upskilling and reskilling, and then on Clara's comment in the chat about the age of the cars. It's not fully my expertise, but I am a consumer of cars as well, and I have to say that either small scrapping subsidies, as we experienced before, would really help the market, because I think the fact that the car fleet in Czechia and in Slovakia is so old might also work for the change and for the EVs if this is supported. If this is clearly said that if you have like quite old car with quite old Euro norm still running and containing the air with your emissions, we are happy to at least provide you a little symbolic subsidy for either hybrid or whatever. But at least this kind of message from the policy is really missing here. But the fact that we have this old car fleet might be even taken as advantage. But yeah, this is maybe a broader debate on the financial possibilities of the state and stuff, but might be an angle.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure that this could be another whole debate, but maybe now we can stick more to the sort of production and investment perspective. Question now to Jan Michal. Again, if we could limit ourselves to 2-3 minutes response. My question would be, if we see that in the past we were highly reliable or reliant on investments coming from abroad, largely focused on the manufacturing activities, on the fabrication activities. Is there any sort of key hurdle which now limits sort of our possibilities to maybe step up the game and maybe to attract more investments which are tied to more R&D, more innovation, to sort of be able to also increase the activities with higher value added? Is there any key hurdle that you see on the way?
Yes, I think this is a very important. This is a very important, actually, key question, which also preoccupies us a lot, because certainly what we would like to see, bringing more higher value activities to the Czech Republic, including supporting the Czech companies or the companies that are already based in the Czech Republic in terms of expanding their and the activities. One reason being that in terms of the labor market in the Czech Republic, I think we have benefited for a decade or more even from one of the lowest or even lowest unemployment rate in the whole of the European Union. So I think this is indeed the way to go. I think what I think is right for that. I think one of the preconditions is that these companies, they are often asking and where are the technical graduates? Yes, where are the people that we can use for these kind of activities in the Czech Republic. So I think one of the things, and I think things are already happening. I think the state and the universities, I think we need to work jointly with businesses to support more the attractiveness of some of these technical fields for among not even among young people, but I would even say among children. So I think that is one in terms of attracting more students into this. The second is certainly also creating, I think, favorable overall economic context in terms of the legal framework, also in terms of the let's say better use of what we have in terms of the financial instruments, indirect financial instruments, for example, tax reductions or tax deductions for companies that invest into R&D. So maybe what I could say that I think obviously automotive industry is one of the drivers behind industrial investments into research and development, with almost 1/3 of the industrial investments coming from the automotive. So I think that is excellent, but I think certainly we need to do more, and I think it is a complexity of the measures that we have to take, including improving the conditions for the startups in the Czech Republic, so that we can not only develop good startups in the Czech Republic that can help with the transfer of know-how into, because I think that's one of the weaknesses actually, yes, how we can transfer the scientific findings and the work of the research institutions into business operations. Yes, so I think supporting transfer, I think that's the other field.
No, thank you very much. This is under very big time pressure, so I guess we could really follow up on this even further. I will have a last question to Maya, and I think I can in advance apologize to our audience that maybe we will be 2-3 minutes in the sort of negative time field. So if you could just bear with us for a couple more minutes. There would be one last question to each of you, really just very simple question. If you could sort of think of any key ingredient, anything that you really miss either in Czechia and Slovakia with this sort of building the resilience, this I would say also buzzword like resilient automotive industry. Like if there is anything that we really miss at this point to say that the automotive is prepared for the future, okay? So that would be a question to each of you. But now a quick question to Maya, because we see that now there is a huge sort of move towards clean industrial deal, new framework for state aid, new opportunities in terms of regional cooperation. So do you see there actually how countries like Czechia and Slovakia can be better prepared for this? Because there will be more and more opportunities, but it also has to be captured somehow. So if you could very quickly elaborate on this.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think I would say, we spoke a little bit about kind of the demand side, like being largely unaddressed still. So I think that's one area where there's something in the works still at the EU level, right? There would be a regulation coming out later this year, I believe. But then the communication that the Commission has already released does sort of outline actions that member states can already take in that respect. I think, in Czechia and Slovakia, I'm not well familiar with the details. I think there's some incentives, but they would be generally sort of weaker in Central and Eastern Europe. So that's one angle that sort of we have to work on. And then, also going back to what Monica was saying, this is still sort of a behavioral change. And so, probably needs a broader sort of support from the government, not only with regulation, but also kind of education and promotion of this behavior change that is needed. Perhaps I would sort of highlight that.
Yeah, thank you. And do you think you could also maybe quickly point out the last joint question, whether you see any sort of really missing ingredient in the landscape of, Czech and Slovakian automotive industries from your perspective, from the sort of Brussels EU perspective? Yes, Maya, if you can take this last joint question, like whether you see any sort of missing piece and ingredient for really building the resilient automotive industry,
Yeah, I'm trying to read at the same time. I think, I would refer back to my sort of last answer. I think, it's really the demand side is unaddressed. Then, infrastructure is something that we're still rolling out. That's in the works. So a number of gaps that still have to be sort of addressed to really support the sector through the transition.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Now the same question to Zdeněk Pecel. Very brief, very quick. What do you miss sort of in the Czech landscape moving forward?
I think it's important to bear in mind that basically there are no silver bullets, no simple solutions. Jan Michal mentioned the good experience with investments by Onsemi into chip production, which is clearly a high value investment, high value production. But all of that investments, the fact that the Czech Republic even was on the map or as a target of that kind of investment was that we have been working in that area for decades. Long ago, since the communist time, in the area there were investments in chip production, chip manufacturing, chip R&D, a university. So there was some kind of ecosystem that even allowed people to be there, people to be interested, and to build on that. We see that investments in chip manufacturers are stalling across the world, for example, in the United States, because simply there are not enough people educated to go forward with those investments. So what we need to plan really decades ahead to have really basic kickstarts of that, and that means focusing on the education, on higher education, and really do our decisions based on data and some kind of virtual idea that something will happen in the end and will solve us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for also making it relatively quick. How about you, Monika? What is the ingredient that you see is missing?
Yeah, thanks. I think I have 2 points. One is the cooperation of different actors. So this aligns with the ecosystem building. Yes, and sometimes it's not easy to decide what to choose, but if there is a base to keep it on, not try to maybe focus on one specific field, but supporting promising initiatives, startups, not solely in one field. And these might be connected. The transformation of the transport industry is not only about cars. So also thinking about public transport vehicles as another option for making the clean air. So this ecosystem in terms of clean mobility as such might be also very useful when thinking about industrial base and where to look at possibilities for jobs and production. So
thank you very much. And also the same question to Jan Michal, if you could very quickly have your remark at the end.
I'll do my best. Thank you. I think we already covered the ground. I think all the cards are on the table, so to say. So for me, 2 points. One is really, I think I agree there is not a single trick, but if we need to do something, in my view, 2 things. Number one, I think we are good where we can see we can develop successfully this triangle of education, of research, and businesses. Yes. And this is why, for example, the Czech Republic is also successful in semiconductors, in electron microscopy. Yes, and I think the ecosystem, number one. And the second, I think, infrastructure, enabling infrastructure, yes, charging stations, etc. I think that can help a lot in terms of the rollout. And then last, maybe I would one else, but I think it's again, it's always on the table. Basically, yes, I think we have to do something with our energy policies to retain our competitiveness.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks to all the panelists for this really great debate. Although we could continue forever, so thank you very much for all your comments and all your proposals for the future of Czech automotive industry and Slovak automotive industry. Before I give the word back to Tamara, maybe just a very quick remark also in the chat, question and a comment from Petr Knapp, just to remind us that maybe it's not always about policy measures, looking at the regulation side, but it's also about the enabling conditions on the side of manufacturers and consumers, which we can also see on examples from abroad. So thank you very much for this comment from Petr Knapp as well. And from my side, that's it for today. Thank you very much. And now the word go back to Tamara.
Thank you very much for a very insightful conversation today and for everybody joining us. I would like to remind you of 2 things. One, that we will be concluding the CEETalks project with the Baltics happening on the 14th of May, looking at the importance of the Baltic interconnectivity with the European continental grid as of February this year. And CATF is also accepting the applications for Central and Eastern Europe fellowship, aiming at the early career professionals from across the region until 4th of May. So I encourage everyone to apply for it. We'll be sharing all of this information in the follow-up email very shortly. But thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of the day.